Two hikers, Mark, 33, and Jess, 28, disappeared deep inside the Grand Canyon's inner gorge. What began as a normal hiking trip quickly turned into a nightmare. Officials blamed heat and confusion, but people close to the case claim there is secret footage showing a giant upright figure carrying a human body uphill with unbelievable strength. The timeline of events is tight. The footprints stop suddenly. The drag marks go uphill, then vanish completely. Rangers called it a heat exposure or fall. Locals weren't surprised. They said this happens almost every season. Investigators gathered the survivors' statements, the exact camping locations, and a few clips from motion cameras placed near where the first hiker disappeared. Authorities confirmed that the missing pair were part of a 4-person hiking team from Flagstaff, Arizona. All 4 were familiar with the area and had done many overnight hikes before. Their friends described them as smart, careful, and experienced, nothing like the careless adventurers who usually need rescuing. The group included 2 men and 2 women, all in their late 20s or early 30s. One member was known as the planner. He carried printed maps, hydration schedules, and safety notes. Another liked to push the group deeper into the canyon, always chasing more adventure. A third was the peacemaker, keeping everyone calm and happy. The last member was a mechanic from a nearby town who hiked every weekend. Their friends said nothing about this trip sounded dangerous. The plan was simple: hike down from the rim, camp for a night or 2, film some footage, and head back with a good story. At the ranger station, witnesses remembered seeing them joke about the old missing person flyers pinned outside. Most hikers ignore those posters, but this group laughed about them. Investigators later called that moment bitter irony. The posters weren't seasonal or decorative. They stayed up year-round because many of the missing were never found. The desert weather might fade the paper, but not enough to erase the warning. The last video from the group showed them happy and relaxed near the trailhead. Investigators now hold that video. The 2 survivors later said there was no sign of trouble, no arguments, no mistakes, nothing strange. Everything looked normal. Yet within 48 hours, 2 of them would be gone without a scream, without a fight, and without leaving more than a few footprints in the dust. The day started cool and calm, cold enough to see their breath, conditions that often make even experienced hikers feel safe. But as every ranger knows, the Grand Canyon doesn't show its real danger until you're deep inside. Heat builds in layers. Sweat evaporates before it forms. By midday, the canyon turns into an oven. The group's water supply dropped faster than expected, even though they followed their hydration plan. Soon, they felt lightheaded, saw their vision narrow, and tasted metal in their mouths, signs of dehydration. Rangers later said this happens often in late September. Then came the first strange discovery. It wasn't a bag or torn clothing. It was a single high-quality hiking boot, sitting neatly off the trail. It wasn't damaged, and the laces were still tied. There was no blood, no drag marks, nothing suggesting an accident or animal attack. One missing boot could mean nothing, but search teams noted that abandoned shoes often appear in mysterious disappearance cases. Some hikers even stopped to take a photo of it, joking around. They didn't know that spot would later be marked as where someone might have been taken. As they continued deeper, the canyon began to play tricks on them. The echoes changed, shadows stretched strangely, and distances seemed shorter. Experts say the canyon distorts sound and sight. It can even silence screams within seconds. But the group stayed calm and confident. By sunset, they hadn't reached their planned campsite. They stopped early near a dry wash under a rocky overhang. A smart decision, giving them natural protection from wind and exposure. What they didn't know was that dry washes carry sound farther than expected. If something or someone was tracking them, it would know exactly where they were. Still, that night started quietly. The survivors later said they heard only the usual canyon sounds, coyotes barking in the distance, insects buzzing, and the soft roar of the river echoing in the background. But sometime after midnight, everything changed. A new sound started, low, long, and deep. It wasn't exactly heard. It was felt, vibrating through their chests like a faraway engine inside a tunnel. Experts later said no known desert animal makes a sound like that. One hiker recorded it on their phone, and investigators now have the audio. It hasn't been released, but reports describe it as unclassified, with heavy echoes and strange pressure in the sound waves. Then, small rocks began falling from the ridge above. Not a landslide, just single stones dropping at steady intervals, almost like footsteps. The survivors said it sounded too slow and deliberate to be wind or erosion. When search teams later studied the ridge, they confirmed that something, or someone, could have moved above their camp without being seen. The shape of the canyon wall and the dim starlight would have hidden anything outside the firelight. When the group shone their flashlights toward the ridge, they saw two glowing eyes reflecting the light. The eyes were spaced wider apart than any deer or coyote, and they were high off the ground, too high. Instead of flaring bright and vanishing like animal eyes, these eyes narrowed, like a human squinting. Wildlife experts said animals don't do that. Still, the group convinced themselves it was probably just a deer. It's a common human reaction to turn the unknown into something familiar, something safe. But the sound didn't stop. After the lights went out, the footsteps came back, slow, steady, and circling their camp. The air grew still, almost silent. Even the insects stopped. Search teams later called it an acoustic vacuum, something that sometimes happens before predator activity. One hiker whispered, "It feels like something's watching us." Another said, "It feels like the darkness itself is leaning closer." Rangers later dismissed this as dehydration and fatigue, but veteran canyon guides disagreed. They said, "When the night goes quiet down there, something big is moving, and it's not afraid." Whatever circled them that night never entered the light. It seemed to know exactly where the shadows began and kept just beyond them, as if it was waiting. By the next morning, the heat returned. Breathing felt like inhaling from an open oven. Everyone was exhausted and tense. Small arguments broke out about how fast to move and how much water to drink. Eventually, one of them, the strongest hiker, offered to scout ahead just 50 yards to a narrow choke point in the trail. He promised to be right back. He walked off calmly. No fear, no hesitation. 30 seconds later, when the others followed, he was gone. Completely gone. The ground showed his footprints leading forward, then stopping suddenly. No signs of a fall, no scuffle, no return tracks. The group searched the area carefully, calling his name, marking the spot with tape, and following every procedure. There was nothing. Rangers later said it must have been an accident, heat confusion, or disorientation. But even they admitted privately that the ground there was flat and solid. No cliffs, no cracks, no way someone could vanish silently in seconds. Whatever took him did it quietly and cleanly. That night, the remaining three barely slept. Every sound outside the camp felt like a threat. When dawn came, the canyon was silent again. One woman suggested hiking back to a higher ridge to try for a cell signal. The plan was careful and safe. She would stay in sight the whole way. The others agreed reluctantly. She walked up the trail, waving back every few seconds, until she passed behind a large rock bend. She was out of sight for just a few heartbeats. When she didn't reappear, the others ran after her, only to find her gone too. There were no cliffs, no holes, no blood, only a single drag mark in the dust. It started where her footprints ended and went uphill against gravity. Rangers later said it was just disturbed soil, but independent trackers disagreed. They said it looked like something grabbed her by the leg or arm and pulled her uphill, fast and strong. The drag line ended halfway up the slope, not because the ground turned to stone, but because whatever was pulling her simply lifted her off the ground and carried her away. The two remaining hikers now understood the awful truth. The canyon wasn't just huge, it was alive, and it was hunting them. With fear taking over and their water almost gone, they packed up and began climbing back toward the rim. Neither could remember deciding to move. It felt like instinct, pure survival. They stumbled upward for hours under the burning sun. Both were dizzy, shaking, and barely thinking. Their bodies showed signs of heat exhaustion, trembling hands, slurred speech, blurred vision. When they finally reached the top, they were barely able to walk. Tourists stood nearby, taking cheerful photos, unaware that a nightmare had just happened a few miles below them. The survivors rushed to the nearest ranger station. Witnesses later said one hiker was shaking violently, while the other could hardly speak. They described what happened: the missing friends, the drag marks, the strange eyes, and the sounds in the night. The rangers listened calmly, typing notes, their faces blank. But something changed when the survivors mentioned the uphill drag marks. One ranger stopped writing and glanced quietly at his partner before continuing, pretending not to react. When the hikers described how their friend disappeared in seconds, the rangers became overly polite, repeating phrases like heat confusion and stress distortion. They said the canyon often plays tricks on people. A rescue helicopter was sent out briefly. It circled, scanned the area, then returned. The officials told the survivors that heat confusion and disorientation were the likely causes. They said disappearances happen more often than the public realizes. The final report listed probable fall and heat exposure. There was no mention of drag marks, no note about missing footprints, and no follow-up search. When one survivor insisted that something carried them away, the rangers simply said, "We see this every season." That line would haunt the survivor for years. After that, the hikers were gently escorted out. There were no alarms, no extended search, no urgency. The canyon had swallowed two people without a sound, and the official explanation blamed the weather. Weeks passed. The case quietly closed. Families of the missing received sympathy, but no answers. Their official documents read like cold equations: presumed deceased, probable fall, likely heat exposure. For the survivors, those words brought no comfort. Instead, they brought guilt, anger, and nightmares. They replayed the events over and over: the silence, the dragging sound, the moment their friends vanished. One of them became obsessed with satellite maps, studying every ridge and valley. The other spent hours re-watching the last cheerful videos from the trip, pausing on each face, frozen in time just before disaster struck. At first, they hoped officials would send another search team, one with better equipment, but no new search was ever announced. The case was finished on paper, and everyone had moved on, except them. Eventually, one survivor whispered the idea that changed everything: let's go back. Not to grieve, but to find proof. Something undeniable. Something that couldn't be explained away. The other resisted at first, but guilt and fear can be persuasive. They both felt they owed it to their lost friends to uncover the truth. So they planned a return mission, this time in secret. They told their families they were going on a short closure hike, but they didn't mention the real purpose. They packed motion-triggered trail cameras, night vision lenses, infrared sensors, spare batteries, and memory cards. They even carried a satellite beacon for emergencies. When they stopped for gas near the canyon, The same station attendant recognized them from before. She didn't smile this time. She just said softly, "Some places keep what they take." Then she walked away. The moment they descended again, both survivors felt it. The air was heavier, thicker. Shadows seemed darker and slower. The canyon felt different, like walking into a room where someone had been arguing just before you entered. They spoke less, moved carefully, and kept glancing over their shoulders. When they reached the old campsite, they saw the remains of their last fire pit, half buried in dust. The bare patch where their missing friend once sat looked like a grave. Neither of them stepped on it. Fear can make even the strongest people behave with strange respect. They began setting up their cameras. One faced uphill toward the ridge, where they'd once seen the glowing eyes. Another pointed down the wash, where rocks had fallen that night. A third was aimed at the narrow bend, where their first friend had vanished. As darkness settled over the canyon again, they waited in silence. No one laughed this time. They just listened. Around 2 a.m., one of the motion sensors went off. The first camera flickered to life, capturing black and white infrared footage. What it recorded would later become the most disturbing evidence the canyon had ever produced. A tall, upright figure walked slowly through the frame. It was enormous, its shoulders wide, its arms long enough to hang nearly to its knees, its head tilted forward, and it never turned toward the camera. In one hand, it dragged someone, by the ankle. The body hung limp, swinging slightly, as the creature climbed uphill with effortless strength. Investigators later confirmed that the clothing on the body matched one of the missing hikers. Minutes later, another camera caught the same figure again, this time pulling a smaller body by the wrist, moving just as smoothly and silently. Experts reviewed the footage and agreed. No known animal moves like that, and no human could drag such weight so easily. Then, the video ended. The survivors froze in horror, realizing they had proof, but also that the creature was real and close. Panic hit them. They tore down the cameras, grabbed the memory cards, and began running uphill in the dark. As they climbed, they heard stones shifting above them, echoing across the canyon walls. Something was pacing along the ridges, staying just out of sight. Once or twice, the moonlight revealed a dark, massive silhouette following them. It never attacked, never rushed forward. It only watched. The survivors said it felt like the thing was escorting them out, as if deciding whether to let them go. When they reached the top, exhausted and shaking, they ran straight to the ranger station again, begging officials to look at the footage. One memory card was taken as evidence. No search was launched. No report was made public. The case remained the same. Missing hikers, presumed dead, exposure and fall. The survivors left with only one horrifying belief. The canyon had allowed them to leave on purpose. Since then, no new information has been released. The motion footage remains locked away, unseen by the public. Locals still whisper about strange noises in the gorge, about hikers who vanish without a trace, and about a towering figure that moves silently under moonlight, carrying what it has claimed. Every year, new flyers appear on the ranger station walls, faded, weather-worn reminders of people who went missing and never came back. And though the official reports still say heat and disorientation, those who've been close to the edge know better. Something else lives down there, and it keeps what it takes.